This is my Acer PLB. It lives in my PFD. That's a lot of acronyms. Personal Locator Beacon, Personal Flotation Device. I bought this when I was living in Norfolk and was paddling in ocean all the time. I made some safety changes when I was paddling there. I did not buy the incredibly popular Garmin Inreach. Was that a mistake? Let's talk about it. Okay, it came down to Personal Locator Beacon or Garmin Inreach. This is not a Garmin Inreach, this is a 66S, but there is an Inreach version of this. It's about the same size, it adds a couple buttons. Let's talk about comparing the two, why I chose this, and why I might have made a mistake. I love this unit. We'll talk about the pros, we'll also talk about the cons, and I'm using this as my Inreach stand-in. We'll talk about the pros and cons of this. Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do the pros and cons of this guy first. This is the Acer Rescue Link Personal Locator Beacon. I'll put a price to this up here. The nice thing, biggest thing about this for me, maybe not the biggest, a big thing about this for me is there's no subscription. You buy it, you register it, you check the battery every couple years. This one is actually good until 2028, which surprised me. It must have been at least a 5-year battery, and you're good to go. I really like that simplicity. I am not a big fan of like non-necessary communication in the backcountry. I go to the backcountry to get away from that stuff. And one of the things before I bought this was I checked with my wife. I was like, hey, do you want me to get a device where I can send you a text message and say, hey, I'm done traveling for the day? She was like, no. I trust you. I know you know what you're doing. I don't need to hear from you when you're out there. That's fine. And so that was a big factor for me. If she had said, yeah, I want daily communication from you, then I would have gotten an Inreach. The other part of this that I really like is that it's built to a much higher spec for durability. A million years ago when I worked for REI, I took part in a training called Acer University. You watch all these videos and then you take a test. It was that sort of thing. It was so that I could talk about the products to customers, but in the process, I learned sort of how they build these. And so it's built to a very high spec for durability and then tested a great deal afterwards. Things like the printed circuit boards are made and then x-rayed to make sure the circuits are all good, and then they're sealed in like a polymer, so like they're dipped in plastic essentially, and then they're x-rayed again to make sure that they're all good. And that sort of thing really speaks to me. I really liked that. It is built much more durably than, say, something like a GPS unit. Not to knock GPS units, but they're going out of their way to make sure that these things work because they come from a realm of, ships at sea. Another part of this that I really liked was that it transmits on 406 megahertz. They use a big acronym of search and rescue satellites. I'll put that down here. And those satellites went up in the 1970s and were designed originally for ships at sea. Many nations got together, put up a fleet of satellites, and designed a system for search and rescue only. That system has since been updated. It is still an older system, but works really well. But 406 megahertz is a much stronger signal than something like an Inreach is using, which is going to commercial Iridium satellites. So I like the higher transmit power. I also like the ease of use. Pop the antenna open, flip this up, press and hold the power button for 2 seconds, and it's transmitting. You can test this by holding this for a couple seconds, and it should light up and flash. There you go. Yeah, so I like the simplicity of use. I also like the small form factor. This is normally tied with a bungee to my PFD and it lives in the pocket. So that way if I am in the water and I'm using it and for some reason have to let go of it, I won't lose the unit. The unit is also highly waterproof and the unit also floats. So I really like this guy. I also really like that the communication from this is going to a government agency as opposed to a commercial company. That commercial company could decide at any given moment to say, nope, you're not paying for those satellites or you're not using those satellites. That concerns me a little bit with things like Inreach and the Iridium network in general. The cons of this guy, it is one-way communication. I can't send text messages with this. Newer versions of this do have a notification that the signal has gone through and that the signal has been received, which this one does not have. So that is a nice feature, but these are one-way communication. For the most part, you don't know who's coming. And more importantly, the people who are coming don't know what's going on. All they know is someone needs help. That's an issue. You do have to send the unit to either Acer to get the battery replaced or to a factory authorized service center to get the battery replaced. The other part of that, though, is besides replacing the battery, they're checking out the unit in all sorts of ways to make sure that it's ready to go. This is really an emergency device only used for emergencies. And once you use it, you send it back to them and you have to replace it. Those are the downsides of this unit. Which brings us to this guy, or we'll pretend that this is an Inreach device. Inreach is available in a number of forms. There's an Inreach Mini, there is an Inreach Messenger, and then the Inreach version of this GPS. And so you've got a number of options, and they range in price. I'll put those over here. Actually, I'll put those over here. The biggest factor for the Inreach products is that they are two-way communication. That opens up a lot of channels because it is communication with another person, but it is also communication with rescuers, and it also gives you the ability to get weather reports and be tracked. All of those are great features if those are features you want. My PLB will not do any of that stuff, so I have to have other ways to communicate with individuals. I have to have other ways to communicate with search and rescue. I have to have other ways to get weather. And because I've been doing this for so long, I have those other ways already. So that wasn't a huge factor in my decision making. It does give you the ability to help rescuers find you in that last 100 yards. So I'll tell you that a big fear of mine as a kayaker is being separated from my boat in the water. And if you think about that, if you're floating in your PFD, you're only visible from here up, right? And so my nightmare, literally this is a nightmare I have, is the rescue helicopter flies over me at 50 feet and never sees me. And what only made it worse was a buddy of mine, his wife, was for a long time a Coast Guard search and rescue pilot. And she said, yeah, that happens. So having something like an Inreach gives you the ability to say, hey, you just flew over me, right? Or it gives you the ability to say, hey, I'm in that clump of trees, right? It gets them that last mile, which is why I carry a rescue strobe, why I carry a whistle, things like that, which you should carry those anyway. It gives you that ability to get your rescuers in that last, 100 yards or 1,000 yards or whatever. Some of them, like the 67i, also give you GPS functionality. Even the Inreach Mini has the ability to do rudimentary navigation stuff. So again, it is a multi-use item. I don't know that I would choose the Mini as my go-to navigation device, but it's good in a backup. Okay, so let's talk about the cons of sort of the Mini ecosystem. They're not built as robustly as my personal locator beacon, but that doesn't mean they're fragile. I feel like they are more robust than, say, your phone, but you still need to be a little bit more careful with them. The Inreaches also have a weaker transmit strength, so I worry a little bit more about tree cover and things like that. There is, of course, a monthly or yearly subscription. You can do it either way. They are now starting to let you sort of turn off your subscription if you're not using the device, but for a long time it has been, you pay for it, you've got it for the full year. I am not a big fan of subscription models. I really don't think it's a good idea, but it's super common. We're seeing it more and more often. I will be very upset if this becomes subscription-based. Okay, so what has me second-guessing my personal locator beacon purchase? And honestly, it was a conversation I had a while ago with that friend's wife who was a search and rescue pilot. And what she said was the thing she liked about the Inreaches was the ability to have that communication. So she relayed a story to me where it was a bunch of fishermen in Alaska whose boat got trapped in some ice, in an ice flow. And they were communicating I'm not sure if we need rescue, but wanted you guys to be aware. And they said, look, here's the deal. We can come and get you now, but the weather is coming in and we won't be able to get you in a couple hours. So then they decided, you know what? Come and get us now. That sort of communication does have me thinking a little bit more about, was this the right purchase? Now, I will say I have a new iPhone, which does satellite communication. I've actually used it a couple times. It works fairly well. So that sort of eases that level of concern. But when it comes time in a couple years to replace the battery in this, I have to evaluate cost of replacing the battery versus cost of an Inreach. And I also wouldn't rule out, for the right trip, bringing an Inreach as well as this. And I will say, I've done a number of trips with people who have Inreaches, and they're great units. They work really well. But right now, for me, I'm going to stick with this guy. I may not in the future. This is very much about picking the unit that is right for you, and I am in the minority. I admit that. The vast majority of people, I think, wants that level of communication, and that's why the Inreaches are so popular. One last thing about this that I really like is that this is the smallest thing in the Acer product line. Not meaning physical size, meaning in terms of robustness and ability, right? Acer builds EPIRBs, emergency position indicating radio beacons, for ships and for airplanes, and that was where they started. And they ended up moving to this as an afterthought, approaching like the hiker kayaker market. And so I think it's a very small aspect of what they do, whereas Inreach is the pinnacle of what Garmin is doing in terms of satellite communication. And I'll tell you a secret, they didn't invent the technology. They bought DeLorme just to get the Inreach technology. It's the peak of what they're doing. It's the cutting edge. This is the bottom edge of what Acer does. So those are my thoughts on personal locator beacons versus Inreaches. I wouldn't say I've made a mistake. I'm very happy with this unit, but I am sort of constantly reevaluating. And another part of this will be, I have to replace my VHF radio, which I've been saying for a couple of years. I'll have to do it by spring because I'm already talking with some people about a spring trip where I will absolutely want a VHF. That might cross over into this realm of communication in terms of safety, right? It'll certainly be a VHF. It will almost certainly have GPS. It will almost certainly have DSC. It may take some of the heat off of this in terms of safety. I think at some point we'll see handheld VHFs that we could carry in kayaks that do all of the communication stuff. Two-way communication via radio, text messaging via satellite, personal locator beacon quality transmitting, or Inreach quality transmitting for rescue. I think that that's a thing and is coming. Okay, that's my thoughts on these rescue devices. Make a choice based on what works best for you. As always, you can support the channel by clicking subscribe. Hey, there's a new thing on YouTube. Try this. Even if you're not subscribed, they started a thing a month or so ago, which is the hype button. So it's for smaller YouTubers, that's me, to get pushed up in the algorithm. So if you look down below, there should be a button that says hype. Go ahead and press that. That would actually help me out a lot. Or I'm curious to see how much that would help me out a lot. So hit the hype button down below. Hit subscribe, hit hype. If you want gear lists or first aid kit lists or risk management stuff or the guides way, all that stuff is on Ko-fi. There are links down below. My books are available in paperback form on Amazon. There are links down below. I'll see you on the water.